Water. It doesn't always seem dangerous until one day you look out the window and see something like this. Uncontrolled and with a limitless supply, water can become powerful enough to lift cars, level landscapes, and drown entire cities. With that, we're about to take a look at some of the worst times water's gotten out of control and some of the disasters that have followed in its wake. Dam disaster. At their most basic, dams are barriers built to stop the flow of surface water. They can also harness the power of the water and use it to generate electricity, control the water supply, and prevent flooding. But it's not always that simple. This is Brumadinho Dam at the Corrego de Feijão iron mine in Brazil. This was a tailings dam, an earth-filled embankment used to store byproducts of mining operations like contaminated water and chemicals. But back in January 2019, a rapid strength loss in the flow of the tailings meant the dam was suddenly too steep and wet to support itself, until one day it collapsed. The crumble unleashed a toxic tidal wave of over 420 million cubic feet of water and sludge. If you were to hollow out the Empire State Building, that would be enough to fill the entire building more than 11 times over. The flow swamped the nearby valley, burying some areas in up to 50 feet of sludge and taking 270 unlucky souls with it. It's tragic, but it's far from the only catastrophic dam burst. Just over a year later, in May 2020 over in the USA, as heavy rains swept across the state of Michigan, a section of the 54 feet tall Edenville Dam came under increasing strain in holding back the huge swaths of water until...
There it goes.
Unable to hold back the 21.5 billion gallons of water in the man-made reservoir of Wixom Lake, the sodden 54-foot-tall embankment crumbled, and all the water rushed through. That's enough water to supply New York City for over 20 days, and in just 24 hours, it was practically empty. But the flooding didn't stop there. Around 10 miles downstream, the floodwaters rose high enough to flow over the top of the 36-foot-tall Sanford Dam. In just a few hours, the endless surge of water flooded the entire surrounding area. Over 10,000 residents were evacuated as water ripped buildings off their foundations, smashed roads and bridges, and destroyed over 2,500 properties. This resulted in an eye-watering $175 million worth of damages. But the U.S. is all too familiar with dam failures. California's Oroville Dam, with a height of 770 feet, is the tallest in the U.S. Yet despite its size, it was no match for the conditions of the winter of 2016 to 2017. The rainy season that year was Northern California's wettest for over 100 years, with 89.7 inches of precipitation falling from October to April. In February, to deal with the increase in water and prevent the reservoir overflowing, the dam's 3,000-foot-long and 179-foot-wide spillway was opened. But the rain kept coming. Weeks later, water was gushing down the spillway at a rate of 50,000 cubic feet per second. That means the flow of water could fill the largest aquarium tank in the entire world, located in the Chimelong spaceship in China, in just 12 seconds. You might be thinking at these volumes the water tore apart the floodgates. However, the floodgates were fine. It was the concrete spillway, which at its thinnest was just 15 inches thick, that suddenly started to erode under the pressure. The erosion became so severe, operators decided to use a second emergency spillway for the first time since its construction in 1968. But it didn't take long for the uncontrollable flow of water to erode this spillway too. Eventually, the rain stopped. But by that point, 188,000 people had already been evacuated. The sheer power of all that water meant repairs to Oroville Dam cost the U.S. some $1.1 billion. Yeah, billion with a B. Oroville? More like Horoville. Damn powerful. Okay, so out of control, water being released from a dam is terrifying. But what does it look like when it's under control? Well, for that, we look to the 1,450-mile-long Colorado River, relied on by 40 million people in Mexico and the southwestern U.S. for their drinking water. 1.9 trillion gallons of water are consumed from this river every year, which, if it were put into a cube, would be over 7 kilometers tall, and it's the job of the Glen Canyon Dam to harness the power of this river's supply. At 710 feet high, the dam, which forms the artificial Lake Powell, has a water storage capacity of more than 25 million acre-feet, or 1.95 trillion cubic feet, making this the second largest artificial lake in the United States. But not all that water stays in the lake. As much as it looks like this dam's been breached too, it's actually part of the high-flow experiment. In April 2023, the dam released 39,500 cubic feet of water per second for 72 hours straight. That's a total of over 10 billion cubic feet of water. The sheer amount of power and massive influxes of water like this is designed to move sand stored in the river's channel, depositing it to rebuild eroded sandbars and beaches downstream. Okay, but how much water is that really? Well, for reference, the average American household uses roughly 40 cubic feet of water per day. So just 1 second of the Glen Canyon's water surge would be enough to supply the water needs of an average American household for nearly 3 years. Wow. Water powerful dam. Ferocious flood. Sadly, harnessing the power of water historically hasn't always been a good thing. And never has that been more true than in China back in 1938. During this time, the Second Sino-Japanese War, fought between the Republic of China and the Empire of Japan, was raging. The Japanese army were storming through China, reaching as far as Zhengzhou in the heart of the country. It seemed like all hope was lost for China. That was until out of nowhere, the Yellow River flooded ferociously, sending the Japanese army into chaos. The Chinese people must have thought it was a miracle. After all, it was June, so there was likely little rainfall, but this was no miracle. The flood was actually caused by China deliberately destroying levees on the river, resulting in a catastrophic flood. It was all an attempt to halt the Japanese offensive. At first, it seemed like a genius decision, preventing Japan from marching westward. But the flood came at a huge cost. 21,000 square miles, an area roughly the same size as West Virginia, was drowned. Catastrophically, as many as 800,000 civilians perished in the waters, and resulting famines and plagues, which also left 4 million homeless. To make matters worse, the flood soon turned out to be of little military value to China, as the Japanese rerouted their attack and soon after captured the city of Wuhan. As for the flood, it took until 1947, 9 years after the levees were destroyed, for the Yellow River to divert back to its old route. Today, the destructive power of the Yellow River is under control. Okay, admittedly, this doesn't look controlled, but don't worry. It's actually part of an operation known as sand washing. It's devised to clear up sediment buildup in the Yellow River. Each year, silt settles on the riverbed, causing waters to rise, and muddy waters to slow in lower parts of the river. To prevent the rising water levels, the sand-carrying water is flushed out of 3 specialized channels in the Xiaolongdi Dam. You really wouldn't want to get in the way of that water because it's discharged at a rate of 9,200 cubic feet per second. Thanks to this super powerful flow, the operation moves a whopping 33 million tons, or just under 6 Great Pyramids of Giza worth of sediment in just 20 days. The sheer scale of the water is so mind-blowing, it's become a tourist hotspot. So, if you ever decide to visit sand washing at Xiaolongdi Dam, don't forget your umbrella. Wicked Waterfall. Now, just over 100 miles north of the Xiaolongdi Dam, you'll find Hukou Waterfall, the second largest waterfall in China. Waterfalls are normally places of natural beauty that give you a chance to unwind. But that doesn't happen here. As the Yellow River approaches the waterfall, it's blocked by mountains on either side. After surging over thousands of miles, the width of the Yellow River bed abruptly narrows from almost 1,000 feet to just 165 feet. Such a sudden narrowing rapidly increases the water's velocity as it plunges down the waterfall. In 2022, Hukou Waterfall was heavily flooded, at which point the water was flowing down here at around 160,000 cubic feet per second. For comparison, around 100,000 cubic feet of water goes over the Niagara Falls every second, despite being 24 times wider than Hukou Waterfall. This is the force of all that water surging over a mere 165-foot wide waterfall. And if that wasn't terrifying enough, all you've got separating you and the force of that waterfall is a measly-looking fence. Well, that's Hukou Waterfall off my bucket list. Gruesome Gorge. Nearly 900 miles southwest of the Hukou Waterfall, you'll find another Chinese hotspot, Tiger Leaping Gorge, a canyon on the Jinsha River, one of the main tributaries of the Yangtze River. Normally, a riverside spot is scenic and relaxing, but not here. At a maximum depth of over 12,500 feet from mountain peak to river, Tiger Leaping Gorge is a dauntingly deep river canyon, dropping down twice as deep as the Grand Canyon. Thanks to its staggeringly steep slopes and narrow channels, the velocity at Tiger Leaping Gorge really picks up, making this one of the most dangerous sections of the Yangtze River. But how dangerous is it? Well, the average flow rate here is 275,000 cubic feet per second. Considering that at its narrowest, this section of river stretches to just 100 feet, that's a whole lot of water. For context, the flow rate here could fill 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools in just 1 second. Yet for some strange humans, that didn't sound dangerous enough. Despite the raging torrents, a team of rafters navigated through this sinister section of river back in 1986. Can you guess what happened? Yeah, 11 of them never left the gorge, if you get my drift. Gee, who would have thought that man versus the weight and power of 3 Olympic swimming pools of water a second was a bad idea? I might have some new Darwin Award contenders here. Coastal collisions. In late August 2018, something sinister was brewing off the southern coast of Japan in the northwestern Pacific. Typhoon Jebi was taking hold. Typhoons are hurricanes that form over the northwest Pacific Ocean, taking shape when wind blows into areas of the ocean where the water is warm. These winds collect moisture and rise, while colder air moves in below. This creates pressure, causing the winds to rotate very quickly, spinning around a center called an eye. As they move across the ocean, these strong winds also stir up large waves from the storm's center. In order for a storm to qualify as a typhoon, wind speeds also have to reach 74 miles per hour. Safe to say, Typhoon Jebi met that criteria, because when it made landfall in southeastern Japan, it whipped up winds over 130 miles per hour. With those wicked winds, Typhoon Jebi also caused colossal crashing waves to batter the coast of southeastern Japan. It was so strong that it battered waves back up the mouths of coastal rivers, taking many small boats with it. Scary as that looked, these were nothing compared to the waves at the coast itself. Based on how small those boats look, I'd guess that this whopping wave is upwards of 100 feet high. Yikes. But it wasn't just boats that felt the force of Typhoon Jebi. Along with the surges of waves that battered the coastline, Japan experienced heavy rainfall, leading to Kansai International Airport becoming completely inundated with water. Yeah, that's not part of a harbor. That's an aircraft apron. The damage was so severe that it was forced to close for 17 days. But even this looked tame compared to what happened to Japan back in 2011. In March of that year, the country experienced a magnitude 9 earthquake, the strongest in its history, striking below the North Pacific 80 miles east of Sendai in northeastern Japan. The energy from the earthquake generated vertical movements along the fault line, displacing gargantuan volumes of water. This led to huge tsunami waves, reaching horrifying heights of 127 feet high, and went as far as 9 miles inland from rivers. Some 123,000 houses were destroyed, almost 1 million more were damaged, and tragically, close to 20,000 people lost their lives. On top of that, an estimated cost of the earthquake and tsunami came in at a horrific $220 billion, making this the costliest natural disaster in history. Manic mud flow. As we've seen, a tidal wave of water can be terrifying, but mix that water with mud and it gets even worse. Take a look at this. Now, a mud flow is a flow of water that also contains debris and dirt, and they typically occur when heavy rainfalls rapidly erode earth on a steep slope. In this case from Switzerland back in 2018, hail in the mountains melted and displaced all that mud. As the great volume of water mixes with the dirt and debris, it liquefies and moves downhill at speeds greater than 50 miles per hour. Thank God for those storm drains. The town of Bardonecchia in northern Italy could have used these back in 2023, as residents were left literally running for their lives after this tsunami-like mudslide smashed its way through the town. Luckily, no lives were lost. Still, it goes to show that these things aren't to be muddled with. Gnarly Nazaré. At first glance, Nazaré, found on the west coast of Portugal, looks like your typical sunny beach, with its sandy shores and placid waters in the summer months. However, from October to March, when the winds pick up, this place transforms. You see, just off the coast of Nazaré is the largest underwater canyon in Europe, entrenched over 2.5 miles deep and stretching 130 miles long. Thanks to the depth of the canyon, the waves are able to travel at a much greater speed, as they arrive at the coast with virtually no dissipation of energy. As such, these waves get big. How big? Well, the largest wave ever surfed in human history was done here by Sebastian Stoltner. He glided along a mega 86-foot-high wave. 86 feet? That's close to the height of Christ the Redeemer. In fact, 7 of the 10 largest waves ever surfed were done at this place. Tantalizing as that sounds to a surfer, I wouldn't recommend trying it. A 35 cubic foot section of any given wave weighs roughly 1 ton. So if you wiped out on a wave more than 80 feet tall with a lip about 200 feet long, then that section of the wave on its own would weigh around 1,200 tons. And that'd be coming down on top of you. Forget about a wipeout. It'd be more like getting pancaked. Sinister shore breaks. Now, Nazaré isn't the only place known for its gnarly waves. Oahu in Hawaii has become infamous for its shore break waves. If you didn't know, a shore break is a wave that forms when waves approach a steep shoreline, causing them to break directly on the shore with little or no wave face. The powerful energy from these waves is capable of knocking anyone off their feet. Even more dangerously, waves can appear small and harmless, but even a 1-foot shore break can possess enough power to pin swimmers to the ground. And with sharp rocks and spiky coral on the ocean floor, it can be a pretty painful experience.
We're screaming. 1, 2, 1, 2.
I don't know about you, but if someone next to me was getting tossed around like a pancake, I'd be too busy running away to think about capturing any footage. Raging whirlpools. When you think of whirlpools, what comes to mind? Maybe something like this, which was spotted in Springdale, Utah in 2021 after flash flooding hit the area. The huge swaths of water caused a single whirlpool to form over an overburdened drain. But maybe you think of something like this, a gargantuan vortex that creates a void in the ocean big enough to swallow ships. Well, scarily, both are real. Whirlpools can come in almost any shape and size, as they rely on opposing currents, or currents running into an obstacle, redirecting a powerful flow of water, and sometimes creating a downward vortex. Now, open ocean whirlpools are unpredictable, so hard to capture on camera, but if we head up to Norway, off the coast of Bodø, in the north of the country, we'll find the Saltstraumen. This is the strongest known maelstrom, which is a whirlpool in a sea or river in the world. The Saltstraumen forms 4 times a day as the tide forces up to 110 billion gallons of seawater through a 490-foot wide strait. When the current is at its strongest, it can reach a staggering speed of up to 25 miles per hour. The surge of water entering the narrow strait stirs up the water, creating whirlpools up to 33 feet in diameter and 16 feet in depth. Such vicious conditions have fed mythology, with Norwegians believing that maelstroms are the home of the mythical kraken, infamous for dragging ships down to their demise. But the toils of the Saltstraumen aren't just confined to storybooks. In 2019, the 220-foot-long Norwegian ship Nidarö ran aground, apparently after trying to navigate through the Saltstraumen. Rumors persist that as many as 60 swimmers and divers have perished in these waters, though no official record exists to confirm that. So guys, if you ever end up near the Saltstraumen, there's no way you should try to swim across it. Watery whirlwind. Now, life-threatening vortexes don't just exist in the water. They can also take shape on top of it. Even from miles away, that looks like an imposing funnel of death. That is a waterspout, an intense column of rapidly rotating air and water. Now, there are 2 types of waterspouts. Firstly, fair weather waterspouts, which are the more common and less dangerous. These form during relatively calm weather along long, flat bases of developing storm clouds, where air begins to circulate along the surface of the water and develop upwards. But tornadic waterspouts are the really wicked ones you gotta watch out for. These get their start as true tornadoes on land before moving out onto water. The average tornadic waterspout moves at some 50 miles per hour, though they have been recorded to reach speeds of over 100 miles per hour. Unsurprisingly, a 100-mile-per-hour vortex of air and water can be pretty dangerous. In 1556, a waterspout hit the Grand Harbor of Malta, sending 600 people to the bottom of the ocean after it capsized their ships. But even in modern times, these things can be perilous. For starters, anyone caught by a waterspout while chilling on the beach can expect to get a face full of parasol, like these poor folks did back in 2022. Don't worry though, no one was hurt. Well, apart from that table. Even further inland, waterspouts can be terrifyingly powerful, as this person saw firsthand.
It's getting ready to hit the channel. Oh, Lord.
Safe to say, if you see a waterspout on the horizon, don't walk away. Run. Perilous pipes. Ever wonder where the water you drink and wash with in your home comes from? Well, water is taken from storage tanks and transported by underground water mains, which carry the water to the faucets in your home. Normally, these things run like clockwork. However, sometimes a water main may crack, causing water to move to the surface. Pressure in the water main causes water to continuously flow. So when a leak occurs, highly pressurized water will burst up until it's sealed up. The pressure of water can be so powerful that it can burst through the ground with ease. Don't believe me? Well, take a look at this scene in Cincinnati from June 2018.
Tri-County Mall.
Yep, that geyser-like burst reached 20 feet in the air. Fortunately, this water main was patched up within a couple of hours. However, when they're not fixed quickly, the seismic surge of water that main pipes pump out can cause entire streets and even blocks to flood. I'm never going to look at my faucet the same way again. Wretched river. What do we have here? A picturesque, peaceful river, perfect for a quick dip. But actually, you wouldn't want to set foot in this water. You see, this is the Strid, an infamous spot on the River Wharfe in Yorkshire, England. Over the course of less than 300 feet, the River Wharfe narrows dramatically from a width of 90 feet to just 6.5 feet, funneling all that water through a tiny channel. While the actual amount of water that surges through the Strid isn't known, one look at how aggressively the water thrashes here tells you it's a lot. Below the surface is a network of sedimentary rock caves and crevices that'd quickly rip apart anyone who fell in. But how deep is it? Well, YouTuber Jackasnacks used a sonar fishing rod in an attempt to accurately measure how deep the Strid really is. And from his readings at the deepest point he found, the Strid dropped down over 65 meters. That's over 210 feet deep. Now, that's not to say this is the deepest point, as the limitations of his equipment meant he couldn't get much closer to the most turbulent part of the Strid without ruining his rod. But still, that means this 6-foot-wide channel has a depth greater than the height of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's no wonder locals claim that 100% of the people that fall into the Strid have never come out. While that's unlikely to be true, this wretched river has claimed its fair share of fatalities, going all the way back to the 12th century. What's the old saying? Never judge a river by its cover. Whopping waves. Have you ever heard of rogue waves? These waves seem to appear out of nowhere, theorized to be a dynamic combination of multiple waves, which have more than twice the height and power of the surrounding waves. They can also be so powerful, they've been credited with sinking supertankers and container ships, with some surviving ships limping back to shore with huge holes in their hulls. Well, the people at a U.S. Army base on Roy Namer Island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean weren't on any boat when this happened.
Close, keep the door closed. Whoa!
Where's Viv?
Whoa! What? Where's Viv? Where's Viv? All right, you good? You good? Oh my.
A 15-foot-high rogue wave had the power to travel inland and smash through the building, snapping the door off its hinges. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Although looking at the way those waves smashed those doors apart, I reckon there was a lot to clean up the next morning. Thousands of miles northwest of Roy Namer, in Arenzano, Italy, a sinister storm whipped up some serious trouble of its own. Staff at one seaside restaurant had the unbelievable task of dealing with a sudden 20-foot-high rogue wave. Luckily, no one was hurt. But despite the best efforts of those workers, that glass didn't stand much chance, did it? At least we've learned a valuable lesson. Never dine at a seaside restaurant during a storm. And that, folks, is what happens when water gets out of control. Have you ever been caught in any of these phenomenon or witnessed any of them with your own eyes? Let me know down in the comments below, and thanks for watching.